is hot and inconvenient, and I'm wearing it for you. Welcome to Bananas. I am Trey Balchowsky. I'm one of the co-founders of Salon, and I am your host and banana for the evening. By a quick show of hands, who is a first-timer here? Welcome! So how does this thing work? What is Salon? Salon is a community, first and foremost, of storytellers, enthusiastic nerds, and curious minds. We enjoy exploring the odd corners of history, science, art, and adventure. But more than that, we are a participatory stage, and our stage is your stage. This is an inclusive community project, and we would love for you to come and join us. So if you have a perfect genius idea, go to this link and put it in. And if you have no ideas, but you want to speak on our stage, tell us that too. During our evening, we like to raise a toast. So if you have not yet filled your glass with something delicious, go ahead and remedy that while I talk. And don't worry, we'll have an intermission for you to top off your glass. Each Odd Salon and this Odd Salon has 6 speakers telling stories, strange but true, from the odd corners of history, science, art, and adventure, surrounding a single theme. Tonight's theme, bananas. We are enthusiastic experts and amateurs alike. Some people will be on our stage for the first time ever, either speaking on stage or at Odd Salon, and some people will have been on stage for all 10 of our years. So be gracious with your applause. On that note, this is not a quiet show. Like other shows, we have our traditional callbacks. All right, regulars, here we go. Thank you. Please feel to chime in as you are so moved. So, let me start with a story. A story that explains, in some part, why I am wearing a banana suit tonight. And like many stories in San Francisco, it starts like this. Once upon a time, a long time ago, at Burning Man, I turned into a banana. The year is 2012. For 3 days, the heat had been above 100 degrees, and for 3 days, a fire somewhere in Nevada had stopped fuel from coming to the playa. As the assistant fuel manager and the only person on duty that day at Hell Station, I found myself in the precarious position of telling people, no, we have no fuel. If you've never met a trust fund baby turned artist, they are just as insufferable as you have just imagined. On that day, I had one screaming at me this far away from my face for 10 minutes. She was claiming that art was essential, and while I agree with her on a philosophical level, I had a critically low fuel supply, and the choice I was being asked to make was giving her guzzling for her RV's air conditioning, or giving fuel to the EMT's golf carts. No, lady, your AC is not essential. She kept screaming at me until her meek assistant moved forward, and in a position that I know this person has practiced many times, moved her along, thrusting some swag in my hand and mouthing, "I'm so sorry," as he got her out of my fuel station, backed into her golf cart, and away empty-handed. For 2 days, 2 days earlier, I had not lost my shit when an artist who shall not be named walled a $20,000 generator into his art piece, which was scheduled to be burned. The day before, I had calmly dealt with 2 of the 3 fuel trucks having mechanical failures. But that day, that artist was my last straw, and I lost my ever-loving shit and went bananas. And thanks to the costume box that was in our fuel station, I not only went bananas, but became a banana. Don't worry, yes, it's 14 years old, but it has been washed. And so, I embarrassed my Mad Max cosplaying theme camp for 72 hours. But it's not just me. The interplay between bananas and art and going crazy is a long tradition. Bananas have become somewhat mysteriously a ridiculously popular fruit and a symbol of eccentricity and comedic timing, and a motif in art, especially the absurd and provocative art. I mean, I had to, right? 2019 Art Basel in Miami Beach. An artist duct tapes a banana to a wall. He didn't make this banana. This banana wasn't special. It wasn't a special varietal. It wasn't interesting. It was just a fucking banana. It was ordinary, the type that you would purchase at our merch booth. And he was under no illusion of what he was doing or how absurd it would appear. And fittingly, he called the piece The Comedian. Okay, this is really... You would think that the moneyed classes that frequent these events, the art connoisseur, would have thrown their hands up and walked away. But no. That fucker sold for $120,000 twice. With a third being donated to the Guggenheim Museum in Manhattan. Now, I have some logistical questions. How often does one have to replace the banana in said piece? And whose job is that in a private collection? Many people were appalled, of course, and others defended the absurd art. I love this quote. This quote comes from a gallery owner, Bill Powers. The genius of Catalan's banana is that it drew out the mainstream media's suspicion that all contemporary art is emperor's new clothes foisted on rich people. Was it Warhol who said, art is whatever you can get away with? Case in point. All of this is bananas enough, and then, in a dramatic turn of events, before the purchased art could be taken home by eager collectors, the display copy was eaten. In an act of art by David Datuna, a performance artist. He called his piece The Hungry Artist. He was not arrested for this stunt, but he was shoved quickly out of the event, and he was not paid for his performance art. After being removed from Art Basel, he was asked, how did it taste? And he replied, it tasted like $120,000. It was delicious. The banana was quickly replaced. Bananas have had an outsized impact on culture. But why? The answer is colonialism and corporate monopolies, but also art. So let's start with the history. Thank you. Bananas are native to the islands in Southeast Asia and reached Africa and Asia in antiquity. In 1851, as part of the ill-fated Magellan expedition, the fruit was described that was found in Philippines as figs, more than 1 palm long. In the Renaissance period, Portuguese colonialists began raising bananas on plantations. But it wasn't until the Victorian period that the banana craze really kicked off in Europe and in the Americas. According to Bananas, an American history, before the 1800s, most Americans had never seen, much less eaten, a banana. But by 1910, the country was flooded with them, transforming it from a luxury and novelty. Banana became a poor man's fruit. In that year, it was estimated that 3 million bananas were imported to the United States, a shipment which would cover an area 20 feet wide from New York to San Francisco, or placed end to end, would extend 13 times around the Earth at the equator. Hand in hand, demand, corporate greed, and government-sanctioned collusion against democracy turned bananas into a bloody fruit. But let's talk about art. Its salacious form got people curious, and from there it crept into popular consciousness and into art in all forms. It appeared in the world of fine art in The Meal in 1891. Charlie Chaplin, built it into the core of comedy with the introduction of the banana slip in 1910. 1915, thank you. From Josephine's groundbreaking gender and race redefining performance in Paris in the 1920s, this put bananas center stage for fashion for fully 100 plus years after. And Andy Warhol's iconic art pop piece, which clearly has a direct line to the Art Basel piece. Today, bananas are the #1 fruit. Okay, really, it's the #2, but who really counts tomatoes as a fruit? A universally understood symbol of comedy and absurdity, and sometimes they are worth $120,000 in an art piece. So I really haven't answered the question of why am I in a banana suit today. Well, in our first year of Odd Salon, 2 years after I became a banana at Burning Man, I was known for wearing a banana suit in precarious times. I promised if we hit 100 followers on Twitter, how times have changed, we're not even on that platform anymore, I would wear a banana suit. And I broke my promise. Shame. So today, 10 years overdue, I stand here raising my glass to the absurd, the hilarity, the off-kilter, and the just plain bananas. And instead of reading some amazing quote about bananas, I looked, there's not really any of them. I instead give you this banana dance. And now that I have made a complete ass of myself, please join me in welcoming tonight's speakers. Barbara North, Jenneviere, Villegas, Chris Carrico, Priscilla Mollard, Aaron Doran, and Kyle Weaver. To start us off, Barbara North.
So, I'm not saying I'm obsessed with banana stories. I'm just saying I was here in December with a banana story, and I'm back with another one. This one was about bananas and their impact on pop culture and music, and today I will be telling you about bananas and pop culture and their impact on music and fashion and capitalism. So let's get to our hat bearers, shall we? We're going to talk about some banana hats tonight and some myth busting about how we think about them. This is Carmen Miranda, mega superstar of Hollywood of the 1930s and 40s. This is her iconic banana hat that she wore in 1943's The Gang's All Here. If you looked at this picture and somewhere in your brain you're like, hey, the Chiquita banana lady, that's wrong. But that's fair. And we're going to talk about why capitalism has given you that mental image, even though that's wrong. What you were really thinking about there was this character, which was introduced in 1944 as the banana mascot of the United Fruit Company. This is Señorita Chiquita Banana, who is a cartoon banana with sexy legs. Carmen Miranda did not voice Chiquita Banana. She was not affiliated with Chiquita Banana. These were two separate entities. And to talk about why we tend to associate them together, even in the context of this talk, and to talk a little bit about how we can all go out and sort of stick it to capitalism with our new knowledge that we're about to learn, we need to start with the bananas themselves. Always the bananas. So from about 1898 to the mid-1930s, the United States was engaged in something that's colloquially known as the Banana Wars. And what this really was United States capitalist imperialism attempts in action in Latin America. Not to get into too much detail and not to be too flip about this, but this was basically big colonizer energy brought by the United States to Latin America in an effort to control tropical trade. The United States sent military troops, the United States sent money, the United States sent ships, and the United States sent their corporations. And one of the corporations that was engaged in a lot of activity in the tropics through this period was the United Fruit Company. The National Maritime Museum in London tells me this is the maritime flag of the United Fruit Company. Bananas are typically transported on ships. The United Fruit Company, in an effort to lend some sort of spice to their banana trade, was looking to incorporate a new mascot. So in 1944, they introduced Miss Chiquita Banana, their mascot, their voice of their banana industry. And Miss Chiquita Banana was pretty derivative of Carmen Miranda, who was very popular at that time. And we're going to talk about why the United Fruit Company was trying to pull some of this popularity into their own story. But since this time, it's been really hard to pull these two characters apart. Up to the point that some of my Gen X and elder millennial friends in the audience might recognize Sesame Street actually did us a little dirty on this one with the introduction of Fruta Manana, who was explaining to us that it was important to pick up our fruit peels from the street and throw them in the trash. This character was a wild amalgamation of both Chiquita Banana and Carmen Miranda in a way that kind of describes the way that we culturally have led these two things together. In 1984, United Brands, the United Fruit Company, rebranded as the Chiquita Company after a series of unfortunate events, including a little bit of an international bribery scandal known as Bananagate. And in 1987, they also rebranded their logo to get away from the sexy cartoon banana to just a lady with a fruit hat. So the company has continued to lean into this idea of the branding, the sort of fruit hat, the sleeves, the whole sort of look that they're really pulling from Carmen Miranda. And if you ask yourself why is this sort of continue to be the pull, and why is this sort of continue to be the sort of like relationship that they want to land, it's because Carmen Miranda is awesome. And so they really wanted, they were trying to pull some of that vibe into their like big fruit conglomerate doing things in the world. But getting into the awesome. Carmen Miranda was born in Portugal in 1909, and her family moved to Brazil shortly thereafter. She wanted to be a celebrity. She wanted to be a star. She was an amazing singer, an amazing dancer, and she put that out into the arts community in Brazil and was making radio appearances, was making stage performance appearances, and started to appear in film. And she was so popular in film in Brazil that even in a laundry list of very popular performers, she would be at the top, and she would be the one that you would see on the poster. Part of what she was doing through her performances in Brazil was really pulling sort of a Hollywood look into what she was doing. So she was using gestures and articulation that was very Hollywood. She was bringing a lot of Hollywood fashion into her performances in Brazil. So you can see here, you know, she was sort of bringing that sort of 1930s top hat look. This was also a production that was a festival of a lot of artists, but you will notice that she is the only one on the poster this time. She was the big celebrity here. And one of the things that she introduced in one of the characters that she performed in Brazil in the 1930s was the idea of this character, the baiana, which was related to this look that persists today in certain regions of Brazil for women who had a particular look and a particular style of dress. So these women tended to wear these very lacy tops, they wear a lot of very big jewelry, and they wear turbans. And on top of the turbans, they carry things. In one of the movies that Carmen made in Brazil, she played a version of one of these characters, but had built into the turban the item to be carried, as opposed to having it be something that she held separately. And that was really the start of this iconic look for her. So mega success in Brazil, huge popularity. She really wants to get to Hollywood, and it turns out Hollywood wants to get to her, but Broadway gets there first. In 1938, Carmen moves to New York for an 8-week run in a Broadway production. Hollywood is still desperate to get her. She's got this look, this style. There's a lot of interest and engagement with the idea of bringing Latin Americans into Hollywood, of the idea of like, how do we think about the Americas as this whole? That was sort of sexy banana-like. I didn't mean it to be that way. So there was such a demand to get her into cinema that Hollywood sent a film crew to New York to film her while she was still appearing on Broadway. So she was doing double duty for these performances in order to get her into this movie, Down Argentine Way, which was her first American production. The movie was released in 1940. You'll see here in the poster, one of the things that's really consistent with the way that Carmen Miranda is displayed in US media is it's a sort of whole body look, because a lot of what was interesting about her was her look, but also the idea of her whole body performance. She was a singer, she was a dancer, she was bringing a lot of herself into these productions. The other thing to note, while this color is in poster, the film was also, and in the 1940s, that was expensive. Carmen Miranda movies in the early 1940s were all in color. People wanted to see the vibrancy of her costumes and the vibrancy of her performance in color. These were big productions. In 1941, Fast Follow movie, That Night in Rio, where she performed one of her iconic numbers, Chicka Chicka Boom Chick. Again, you'll see here she is appearing in color. She's actually the only person that appears twice on this poster, even though she's third billing. But people were excited to see her. People were very enthusiastic about being able to engage with her, and these movies were so popular in the United States. They were also popular outside of the United States. These were distributed in Brazil and other Latin American countries to great acclaim also. People were excited to see Carmen Miranda's performances. In 1943, she appeared in The Gang's All Here. This is the lady with the Tutti Frutti hat. In 1944, Chiquita Banana hit the scene. In 1944, Carmen Miranda also appeared in a production called Something for the Boys, playing a character named Chiquita Hart, irrevocably linking Chiquita Banana and Carmen Miranda for all of us. It's rumored that United Fruit actually approached Carmen Miranda to see if she would be interested in sponsoring them or appearing as part of their branding. Obviously, that did not happen, even though that connection was made time and time again. Following 1944, Carmen Miranda continued to work in Hollywood. She was really pushing for the different types of roles that she was getting cast in. This look was getting old for her. She was tired of this. She kept getting put into these roles that were becoming more and more narrow versions of this role that she had originated, this visual, this sort of style that she had originated. She wanted to play a romantic lead. She wanted to play a comedic lead. Apparently she had great comedic timing that was not being utilized in any of these movies. And she started to push a lot for how she was presenting herself in film. So she was getting bigger and more extravagant in some of the musical numbers, really pushing into more campy territory. She was doing some interesting things with the way that she presented herself in the course of the movies. So when she was speaking English, she would be using more of a little girl voice through the sort of broken English that she had been scripted into. But when she would speak in Portuguese or sing, she would use a more mature tone, that she would be using more sort of suggestive language, or in some cases more elaborate wordplay in Portuguese, in an effort to play to both what the American audience wanted her to be and how she wanted to present herself for her Brazilian audiences. World War II ended, the Banana Wars ended, and the sort of life cycle of the caricature that Carmen Miranda had become through the course of what the films had scripted her to be started to move into the end of its life cycle. And what I consider to be the most depressing part of all of that, they started to shoot her movies in black and white. That did not stop her. She went on to be a producer in her own right, and to move into stage performances, because this woman was nothing if not persistent in her ability to put herself in front of an audience. She was kind of a badass across the board. She was an international superstar. Her movies were popular in multiple countries. She was the highest paid female performer in 1946. She was making bank off of these movies, regardless of how she might have felt about the characters she was portraying. She was the first Latin American star to be invited to the Hollywood Walk of Fame, where you can still to this day see her handprint and the print of her wedge platform boots, which she brought into US fashion at the time. She was a fashion icon. The turbans, the boots, the big costume jewelry, all of these things that many of us still have in our closets today were all things that she brought to us as part of this vision of herself that she had created, as part of the character that she was putting forward, and as part of the way that she was helping to sort of translate across different cultural lines. Carmen Miranda was awesome. Whoops. Chiquita Banana was a cartoon banana with sexy legs that was 100% a capitalist attempt to bank off of the popularity and fame of Carmen Miranda to sell some bananas. So I'd like to invite you, friends, as you leave here tonight, if you take away one important factoid to share at parties months and months later, Carmen Miranda is not the Chiquita Banana lady. Carmen Miranda was the highest paid female performer of 1946. This is a sexy cartoon banana with legs. As Carmen Miranda had moved out of the limelight of film and was still doing some work in fashion, she was doing a lot more stage shows. And one of the stage shows, she was performing a number, which I would like to end with a little clip of tonight. Not her singing, because I'm afraid of the video, and not me singing, because I could never live up to her. But I wanted to share some of the words that she continued forward with about her feelings about her relationship with Hollywood, and her feelings about sort of how the world had landed for her in this world where she was pushing for some different norms, where she became heavily affiliated with her sort of turban hats and fruitiness, and some of the bananas of it all. So in closing, I would like to raise a glass to Carmen Miranda in her own words. All I do is the boom chick chick. I'm getting sick of the boom chick chick. But if I quit my job, it's not disturbing. I'm even better off than Ingrid Bergman, because I could sit at home and eat my turbans and still make my money with my bananas.
Thank you, Barbara. Next up, we have a longtime listener, first-time caller, long-time audience member, first-time speaker, Jenneviere Villegas.
All right, so I have to tell you all that Trey and I have been friends for decades. And for the first 10 years, she always had to write me emails to say, how do I spell your first name? And last night, she sent me a text message to say, how do I pronounce your last name? Because when you're friends for that long, last names don't matter, friends. All right, you know what? We're just going to dive right in. Allow me to set the scene. It is 1922. Fuck yes. You are in a performance hall, not altogether unlike this one. On the stage is nothing but this huge screen painted with this huge face, and where the mouth should be is a hole cut out. Now behind the screen, where you can't see, is a 6-piece orchestra and a tall, bejeweled woman sitting on top of a stepladder, holding something that looks like a traffic cone, and she is prepared to shout at you through this traffic cone for the next 2 hours for her performance called Facade. This woman is basically like if Lady Gaga and Tilda Swinton were combined and then took a time machine back to the 1920s to dominate the literary scene. She was one of the most eccentric, polarizing, and utterly fascinating features of the 20th century, Dame Edith Sitwell. Now, as a sidebar, I wrote that whole Tilda Swinton line before I learned that Tilda Swinton actually did do an homage to Edith for W Magazine in 2018. You should absolutely look up the photos. They are gorgeous. And then I learned that Tilda Swinton is Edith's real-life cousin, no joke. Art is wild. All right, back to Facade. The critics thought it was bullshit. But before we can talk about that, we actually have to go back in time to Edith's childhood. We need to visit Derbyshire to discover how she became a legendary eccentric. Edith was born in 1887, and her early childhood here at Renishaw Hall. Love that for you. So yeah, her early childhood here was, to put it mildly, a horror show. Her father, Sir George Sitwell, was also a famous eccentric. He was one of those really great guys who thought that education for girls made them unwomanly, and he refused to send Edith to school. He also placed a sign at the entrance to their home, which read, "I must ask anyone entering the house never to contradict me or differ from me in any way, as it interferes with the functioning of gastric juices and prevents me sleeping at night." I told y'all he was a really great guy. Her mother, Lady Ida, here in white, was an unhinged alcoholic. And in one particularly bananas moment, Edith was sent to pawn Ida's fake teeth to buy her mother brandy. Good parenting. We love that. Ida unleashed horrifying rages every day onto Edith. And one biographer wrote, "There is no more important fact in Edith Sitwell's early life than her mother did not want her." Now, despite a childhood that rivaled the storyline from the movie Mommy Dearest, Edith grew and became a woman who is nothing short of a walking art installation. She wasn't a conventional beauty of the time. In fact, her nose was so large and misshapen when she was young that her parents made her wear a metal truss with hooks up her nostrils and like leather strapping around her head to try to correct its shape. She was also a towering 6 feet tall. But Pablo Picasso, yes, that Picasso, the artist, said of her face, "It's a collector's piece." And Cecil Beaton, The renowned photographer and painter described her as a tall, graceful scarecrow. So basically the opposite of me. She became known for her elaborate outfits, which included velvets, exotic rich turbans, and rings the size of ice cubes or doorknobs. Novelist Virginia Woolf described her as transparent, like some piece of bone one picks up off the moor, with seawater stones gracing her frail hands. Her outfits grew increasingly extreme over time. She was capital E eccentric, and this, combined with her, let's call them unkind words to critics, were undoubtedly part of the reason that she was judged so harshly. Get it? All right, so let's come back to 1922. Edith is 35 years old, and her performance, Facade, has just debuted, and it was unlike anything the world had ever seen. There was Edith behind the curtain, like some tall, turban-bedecked Wizard of Oz, vocalizing through a thing called a Sengerphone, which is a glass megaphone, and it was all over this absurd caterwauling music. The public premiere of Facade was something that was considered a succès du scandale, which is something like a work of art that gains notoriety because of its scandalous nature. So basically, Facade was like that song Friday by Rebecca Black, or Lady Gaga's Meat Dress, or Miley Cyrus's VMA performance, or Balenciaga collab with Crocs. Like, everyone loved to hate it. Is it art, though? Is it?
If you can get away with it, yes.
Yes, man above. Was that God? Okay, debating what makes good art. I love you all so much. Debating what makes good art isn't exactly a new concept, but the critics in 1922 were pretty unified. They deemed Facade at the time basically a live performance of nonsensical words and rhythms that dance around coherence like a cat avoiding a bath. The press, as you may expect, was unkind. The Daily Graphic's headline called it drivel that we paid to hear. The Manchester Guardian wrote of a relentless cacophony, and the Daily Express loathed the work, but they did admit that it was naggingly memorable. Noel Coward, a very unfortunately named poet, stormed out in the middle of the performance, calling it pretentious nonsense. Even the orchestra didn't like it. The clarinetist asked the composer, "Has a clarinet player ever done you injury?" Now, Edith, who had a thin skin for criticism, responded, "All the pipsqueakery are after me in full squeak." And I realize that to our ears, this clapback sounds kind of tame, but at the time, it was the equivalent of Madonna saying, "I'm tough, I'm ambitious, and I know exactly what I want. If that makes me a bitch, okay." In fact, if we pan out, Edith had a lifelong talent for withering, era-appropriate put-downs. She once remarked about Virginia Woolf, "I enjoyed talking to her, but thought little of her writing. I considered her a beautiful little knitter." About fellow poet D.H. Lawrence, she said, "Mr. Lawrence looked like a plaster gnome on a stone toadstool in some suburban garden." She was savage in her criticisms, but Edith was well known for having a dual nature. She was also fiercely loyal to her friends. If we catapult ourselves forward, when Edith was 66, we find her tightly bonded with, of all people, Marilyn Monroe. A bit of a progressive thinker, instead of criticizing Marilyn for posing nude to make money, as people expected her to do, Edith actually defended her, saying, and please imagine this in a delightful English accent, "There have been nude models before now. It means nothing against a person's moral character. If people have never been poor, perhaps they don't know what it is like to be hungry." Now, as Edith grew older, her eccentricities deepened. Constant physical pain, tight finances, and hardships with friends and family, combined with a steady intake of wine and gin, took their toll. She was always angry. At one point, she proclaimed to have some clairvoyant abilities. Paranoia crept in, making her believe that everyone who ever loved her was either ignoring her needs or actively exploiting her. She became unreasonably fearful about getting ill, and so she started opening all of her letters, wearing gloves to avoid infection. Who knew some of us would be doing this in 2020, okay? In her later life, she was almost always depressed, and the way that she got out of a funk was to pick a fight. She'd write scathing letters to local publications, provoking fellow writers into lengthy back and forths. She was basically the someone's wrong on the internet meme of her time. But through it all, her work endured. Despite its original box office flop in 1922, Facade gained notoriety and a fan base and continued to be performed through the late 1970s. Plus, a full 42-track version from 1993 on something some of you may remember called a CD. For those of you who don't remember CDs, think Pandora with more plastic and fewer advertisements. And fewer songs. You can even find performances on YouTube if you would like to yourself take in what would eventually become known as one of Edith's most progressive masterpieces, filled with melodies and new rhythms, and I'm gonna be really honest, it's real confusing. These days, critics have come around to understand that Dame Sitwell used her wildly experimental piece, Facade, to drive a dying art form forward. She called the poetry that immediately preceded her flaccid, love that for her, and sought to change it. And she did, despite her eccentric and polarizing personality and shocking fashion. Sure, much like our friend Moira Rose, her eccentric appearance, withering criticisms, and sharp-tongued comments on other famous intellects of the time gained her notoriety to an extent. But it's her innovative, meticulous, prolific, and sometimes bananas art that made her one of the most influential and ingenious poets of the era, particularly when the modernist movement was almost exclusively male. So, get your glasses out, people. I can almost see them. All right, so here's the Dame Edith Sitwell, the high priestess of 20th century poetry, a woman who looked the status quo dead in the eye and said, "Not today, Satan!" May we all channel a bit of her audacity and penchant for fabulous outfits in our own lives.
Toe shoes. No. But we have a bartender. You stepping over. No, it's great. I'm gonna go right there. Okay. Yes. I'm gonna go this way. You're gonna go that way. Our staff is getting supplies just a second. Okay. I'm known for my flailing hands. Let's just do this. All right. The show must go on. Welcome Chris Carrico to the stage.
I just kicked a piece of glass under this table. I'm going to deal with elevating this microphone as a way to kill time. Thank you. Maybe. There's some, yeah, like right there.
Oh, don't cut yourself. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Perfect. Scout, thank you so much. Let's hear it for Scout and the bar staff for cleaning up the sharp objects. We good? Don't worry, this is on theme. Ready? Raise your hand if you've ever eaten a banana. Okay, that's most of you. Raise your hand if you've ever wanted to continue eating bananas in the future. Noticeably less. Shall we? All right. Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a nerd, as are most of you. That's why you're here. And maybe you've seen news articles about how the banana may be going the way of other lovable, recognizable organisms like the dinosaur, the dodo, or the woolly mammoth, in that it's going extinct. Scientists are racing to save it. You'll get dueling headlines every once in a while. The earliest of these I've found in the current incarnations from like 2003, that the banana is going extinct in the next 10 years. And it's a little bit past 2013 at this point, and yet these are from just the last year. So you might ask yourself, how could this be? What's killing all of our bananas? Do I have to worry about my bananas? Am I going bananas? Yes. And I'd like to ask you a question in return, which is, bananas, what are they really? Trey kind of got to this in the beginning. They are a berry. They're from a very large grass, very large, not that kind of grass. And they're from Southeast Asia. Yes, that's right, that's maps. And do you want to know how those bananas got across those oceans? It's... Yes. Thank you. And that's really it. Like, bananas are from Southeast Asia and South Asia. It's hard to pin down exactly where they started, and they've mostly made their way to other places in the world on ships. Originally by mostly Arab merchants, and then by Europeans who like to think they invented ships, but mostly just invented transcontinental slavery. But this only partly answers the question of how you in San Francisco are eating bananas. And although we got to this a bit earlier, once we get to the point that European colonial powers had established large banana plantations in the quote-unquote New World, aka mostly Central America and Brazil, there's a couple of key ingredients that got them to the American supermarket that we know and suffer through. The first one of which is ice. Prior to the early 1800s, basically, if you wanted to keep stuff cold in the summer, like fresh fruit, meat, whatever, you just ate it as fast as you could. And then in the upper Midwest in particular, where it's too cold, people started cutting apart lake ice in the winter and transporting it south, particularly along the Mississippi River and its various tributaries. And that's where we have cocktails. You're welcome. And then, after the Civil War, people in New Orleans who were looking for something to do and maybe had some investment flooding into town from the north and carpetbags, invented a mechanically driven ice factory, which meant that you could suddenly now make cocktails in August to get through the hurricanes, which is obviously great, but also you could transport perishable goods like, oh, I don't know, bananas. Thank you. And then, that's right, this is where the ships come in. You started getting these fruit transportation companies that can now take advantage of the newly available ice in the southern US to bring bananas in from the Caribbean where they'd been planted on these ships to the ports in the southern US that were now freshly connected by railroads to the north, who they were no longer fighting, and they'd sell all these bananas for market, right? And you'll notice that this ship is white, and that's not just like a colonialism thing, it's also because it reflects more sunlight, so the ice that you've got in the hold to keep your bananas fresh lasts longer. And that's, thank you. And I'd just like to say on a personal note, my great-grandfather was a banana ship captain. So he met my great-grandma in Mexico as a result of coming over from Spain and therefore didn't get bombed to death by fascists in the 30s. So bananas brought you this talk. Fuck fascists. Except, of course, that if you really need like a lot of bananas like to sell to the whole United States, you start doing things like deposing the government of Nicaragua. So also that previous statement has to kind of exist in tension with the fact that all of the so-called banana republics you've heard about in Central and South America happened in part because of the US fruit companies building local railroads so they could ship more bananas back to the US to sell to, past us, basically. Urban consumers of income and taste. And so this system, as it evolved over the course of only like 5 decades, resulted in a commercial banana by like the 1910s of a variety called the Gros Michel, aka Big Mike. I know. And the reason why, A, it apparently tastes delicious, I know, and B, it's got a really thick peel. They just continue writing themselves, which allowed it to survive shipment better until this disease called Panama disease or banana wilt was first observed in Australia in 1874, and within a few decades had basically taken over like most of the commercial banana plantations across the world. And Gros Michel was particularly susceptible to this, to the point that we started getting that like song from the 20s, Yes, We Have No Bananas, because the fungus fucking killed them all. And so you could say, wow, this happened so fast. But yes, also 50 years before, people hadn't had mass banana plantations that required them to depose Central American governments. So really everything was happening very fast at this point. And the problem with Fusarium wilt is that it colonizes soil. It lives in the soil. And then when you plant more bananas after, like, I don't know, torching the field or something, the soil fungus is still alive and all your other bananas also die off. And then you have to plant something else, which it turns out large industrial fruit companies with a top-down architecture are really bad at. And they could, like, I don't know, let local farmers alternate the crops to something else, but no. And the solution to this for European exporters and American exporters was to go to a British horticulture nerd named William Cavendish, with his house pictured here. It's much more interesting than the pictures of him, I'm sorry. Who in the earlier 1800s had done a bunch of like breeding exotic tropical figs, including the banana that we currently know and love, the Cavendish, which is disappointing but available, travels well, and most importantly was resistant to Panama disease until we tried planting Cavendish bananas. Thank you. That's a excellent work, class. We tried planting Cavendish bananas in the 1990s in peninsular Malaysia, as it's called, aka not the part that's over on the big old island over there. And it turns out that if you plant a clone with no immune system on the island that it evolved from a species from, the native soil fungus will just eat the shit out of it. Science. And at this point, this subspecies of this fungus, aka TR4, has now covered basically the entire tropics and is once again wiping out the commercial banana plantations, which is why you keep seeing news articles about, oh no, the banana's going extinct. So the fun thing about this is that in Malaysia, Indonesia, other parts of like island Southeast Asia where bananas are from, this has already been there for millennia, and they have bananas, which you'll notice still continue to be growing in spite of the presence of this fungus. And they don't get entirely wiped out for it. So this also isn't the only disease affecting bananas. This is like a bacterial banana disease, which you'll notice looks almost exactly the same at the banana level as the fungal banana disease, but it's caused by something totally different. There's even banana viruses, just like humans get. We also get fungus. Don't worry about it. It's fine. And the big thing for all of this, no. See, this is what we're fighting. This is a wild banana. It's healthy, it's delicious, and it's full of seeds, which Americans hate. The reason why wild bananas don't all die off from one goddamn fungus is because they're not clones and they fuck. That's it. That's the secret. Just let the bananas have banana sex and you'll be fine. They're shaped evocatively. The biggest problem with all of this isn't even American consumers not making smoothies properly. It's that in the eastern highlands of Africa, there's an average banana consumption of Uganda of 400 pounds of bananas per person per year. The main staple crop is bananas. Your smoothies, I don't give half a fuck about. But if Central Africa can't eat their main staple carbohydrate, that's a big fucking problem. So what are they going to eat next after our international capitalism fungus destroys their food supply? And this is why people are studying banana mutants. That's the answer, right? Basically, aside from the commercial fruit value in the United States, which is considerable in a dollar value, this is a big food security issue for large parts of the world, especially in the developing world. And so there's varieties of bananas that you can get right now that are not as susceptible to this fungus, or we could just eat wild bananas, obviously, but let's not get into spitting seeds out. We know we're not equipped for it emotionally. And then there's this other thing, which is that if you put new crops through, you can actually just keep the bananas alive. So earlier I said the Gros Michel banana was basically extinct. But then the more reading on this I did, I realized it's just commercially extinct. And you're like, what does that mean? And the answer is that you can buy Gros Michel bananas right now from Florida. And the only reason they're not commercially available anymore is you have to alternate them sometimes so that the fungus doesn't just take over your entire banana plantation that you only plant bananas on forever like an idiot. So the rumors of the banana's death have really been greatly exaggerated. Big Mike just had to learn to live a little smaller. And I think that the overarching theme here that I want to leave you with is that when humans decide that they're going to dictate all of the rules for how an ecosystem works based on their experience marketing things for 3 decades or so, we start running into other disease-related problems, shall we say. As everyone remembers, if you go far enough into the bat-containing forest, eventually you get whatever is getting the bats sick. And here we are, 4 years later, still dealing with that bullshit, but mostly, not entirely, but mostly alive. And I'd like to finish this by raising a glass to the bananas. May they also mostly survive in whatever form for as long as we want to keep eating them.
Oh yeah, that's too tall. Here we go. There we go. Thank you, Chris. I'm very glad the banana is not going to go away. All right, it is time for our intermission. But before you go, don't leave this house because we still have 3 more talks coming. We have penis snatchers and bad idea air races and banana pirates. While you go and get your fancy drink that I hopefully don't knock over to the ground, also head to our merch table to get glassware that I will not throw on the ground, stickers, banana oddities, and a banana Harvey, of which I think there is one left. Two banana Harveys left. And you can also sign up to be a member. If you're not a member yet, become a member and get discounts on tickets to this fair show, as well as all of our events that we throw just for our members. Thank you so much, and we'll see you back in 15. your way back to your seats. There are a few empty reserve spots. If you would like, if you've been standing to find a reserve spot, go ahead and do that. As you're getting settled, I want to tell you a little bit about an awesome show, or a tour rather, that one of our fellows here and our producer in New York runs here in San Francisco. It's called the San Francisco Ghost Hunt, and it is having a small season.
Hi. My name is Christian. I'm a longtime fellow of Art Salon here. I co-produce the one in New York. Yes, there's an Art Salon in New York. Our next show is July 24. But I'm here for the summer because I'm very bi-coastal, and I run the San Francisco Ghost Hunt Walking Tour. It's been around since 1998. I'm the co-creator, and then I took over a few years ago as my friend retired to Kauai. It is a haunted history walking tour of San Francisco and of Lower Pack Heights. You hear about real people who really died and the reports of their hauntings after that. And we even end in a haunted hotel. And maybe I will do some spooky magic for you at the end of the tour. So my first tour for the summer is tomorrow night. Runs Wednesday through Sunday at 8 p.m. Lower Pack Heights, sfghosthunt.com, or just type in that up there into the Google and you'll find me. And that's it. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
All right, and back to our stories. To bring us back, Priscilla Mollard.
Hello, I am Sparkly. Hello, I am Priscilla Mollard, and I am here to bring the tone of the evening right the fuck down. And the microphone up. Thank you. Now, I've touched on penises on this stage before. Consensually, of course. And you know, the thing about penises is that humans throughout history have been fascinated about them for a variety of reasons. Mostly, they're fucking funny, right? They're fucking funny. They were funny 2,000 years ago. They're funny now. And by the way, 1 year ago, you're damn right it is. 1 year ago, I made a solid promise to Butt Boobs Balls Man that I would have him back on this stage, and I'm just so happy that you could all join me to make that a reality. Give it up for Butt Boobs Balls Man, honestly. Yeah, dicks are funny, okay? But for one weird little German man in the 1400s, they weren't funny at all. In fact, they were deadly serious. Now, I want to introduce you to Heinrich Kramer, Dominican monk, inquisitor, all around just shitty medieval dude, right? Now, to say that Kramer was interested in dicks, this would be an understatement. The man was obsessed. Obsessed. And in 1486, he was able to combine his twin passions, which is a love of dicks and being afraid of women, to complete the publication of one of the most influential books ever made, the Malleus Maleficarum. Now, boo, boo. Boo to that. Boo earns. Now, in it, he described in very, very detailed and frankly alarming specificity not only how to identify, try, and execute witches, but he finally answered this age-old question of what do witches want? Well, surprisingly or not, it's dicks. It's dicks. According to Kramer, it's a real sort of, they're after me Lucky Charms situation, except the Lucky Charms is dicks, right? And the leprechaun is this dangerous German lunatic. So, you know, otherwise exactly the same thing, really. And it was a problem of epidemic proportions. I mean, she's stealing dicks. they're stealing dicks. According to Kramer, entire ladies' auxiliary garden parties were getting together expressly to steal dicks. I mean, like this one's even got the cat involved. Out of fucking control, okay? Now, Kramer knew that purloined penises were the #1 threat affecting Europe. Never mind the plague, never mind the sweating sickness where you got anxiety one day and then fucking died. Like, never mind that. Never mind any of that. All of these were trivial concerns. Fight the real evil, said Kramer, which was Mrs. Whiskers here and her wicked dick-nicking witchery. Okay? Now, so obsessed was Kramer with these penis-hungry witches, or all women, as he thought of them, that when he was given the opportunity to investigate a mysterious death in the village of Innsbruck in 1484, 2 years before publication of the Malleus Maleficarum, he leapt at the opportunity. Now, before this point, witchcraft really wasn't that strongly associated with women or with the devil in general, but all of that changed with the death of Jorg Spice. Look at this absolute fucking unit, first of all. Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. Jorg Spice was a knight in the village of Innsbruck. Dashing, robust, but one day, he started feeling poorly. He started feeling not himself. Poor Jorg. So the doctor was called, and the doctor said specifically, you want to live, you stay away from Helena Schuberin. Now, I'll admit, that's weird, right? That's weird. That's a little bit weird. It's very specific. Now, Helena Schuberin was a local woman who was married to a very important man. And look, we don't have time to get into the ins and outs of the Real Housewives of Innsbruck right now. But I think it's safe to say that perhaps some fuckery was abounding. Right? But anyway, Jorg died. Yeah, poor Jorg. Not a unit no more. Jorg died. Kramer came to town, and he became very interested in Helena Schuberin. Like, really, really interested. Like, way, way too interested. To the point that Helena told him, "Fie on you, you bad monk. May the falling evil take you." Now, as your local medieval expert, let me translate this for a moment into modern parlance. Back the fuck up, you Teutonic incel creep, okay? Kramer's behavior became so obsessive towards Helena that the church had to intervene. They were like, you know what? You're done. You're done. You're gonna leave this bitch alone. That's basically the church's position. And do you know how creepy you have to be for the Catholic Church to be like, whoa, man, whoa. What people do in the privacy of their own homes is none of our business. In 1486? Now, suffice to say, Kramer was pissed. He was not only pissed off, he was humiliated. So what did he do? He did what any reasonable man in his position would do. He ran home, he slammed his bedroom door, he threw himself on his bed, and he proceeded to write the most epic burn book of the 15th century. Now listen. Listen, Helena Schuberin may have been a fugly slut. I don't know. The answer is unfortunately lost to the mists of time. But what we do know is that 2 years later, the Malleus Maleficarum was published. And now, I'm only here with you briefly. We don't have time to go into every detail of the Malleus Maleficarum. But I want to give you a couple of indications of the ways that Kramer felt that witchy women were trying to steal, conceal, or otherwise abscond with men's penises. And to help me in this, please welcome back Butt Boobs Balls Man. And with my dear friend here, let's play a little game of medieval hide the banana, right? So, one of the ways that some clever witches would steal a dick, right, is to bewitch the owner of the now detachable penis into thinking that she had not, in fact, stolen any dick at all. She would just watch him walk around the village all dickless, just tee-hee. Sometimes they were less subtle, however. Sometimes witches would steal 20 to 30 penises at a time and store them in a box in a bird's nest. What else are you gonna do? I mean, where, according to Kramer, they would move themselves around, wiggling about, waiting to be fed oats and corn. Likely by a bamboozled mother bird who thought something along the lines of, "What the fuck have I done?" Now, some witches, they would just cut out the middleman entirely, so to speak. And they would steal spilled semen right from the ground where it had been spilled. And they would use it to have devil babies or, I suppose, cause hailstorms. Why limit yourself? Which, it does beg the question, honestly, that I have not heard anyone asking. How much spilled semen was just lying around in the dirt in a medieval village? Oh my God! Oh. Put that in Outlander, but you won't, So with that, I would ask you all to raise a glass with me and of course, Butt Boobs Balls Man. In commemoration of Helena Schuberin, the women who found themselves on the wrong side of the Malleus Maleficarum, and of course, the hard-working birds of 15th century Germany, who suddenly found themselves single moms to 20 or 30 disgusting human penises. May we all have your tenacity, ladies.
You have to wonder where he got these ideas from. What was he smoking? And now, for an air race of bananas proportion, Aaron Doran.
Is that? Yeah. Oh, hey, there we go. Talk about service. Haha. All right. Hello. We got a long way to go and a short time to get there, so let's get moving. May 21st, 1927, after 33 hours of nonstop flight alone in a wicker chair, fighting hallucinations, ice, and fog, Charles Lindbergh successfully lands in Paris, completing his solo flight across the Atlantic, and the world is enraptured by his feat. Among those caught up in the excitement is James Dole, namesake of fucking Dole. Dole pineapple juice, Dole whips, Dole bananas, all that. to bring attention to and tourism to what was then considered a bit of a backwater, Dole puts up a $25,000 prize to the first pilot that can successfully make the trans-Pacific flight from the continental United States over to Hawaii. The interest in the prize is overwhelming. So further rules were put down, and the Dole Air Race, or the Dole Air Derby, was officially on. The most important rule changes were that any pilots vying for the prize must register and pay a $100 entry fee, and no contestant could depart for Hawaii until noon on August 12th. All in all, there were officially 15 entrants. Dole had hoped that Lindbergh would take on the challenge, but alas, Lucky Lindy declined. Though, we don't need that baby-losing anti-Semite. Given the outcasts and risk-takers involved in the early days of aviation, I could be here all night talking about the various characters involved in the Derby. So let me pull out three major players. First up is Art Upside Down Gobel, a founding member of the 13 Black Cats stunt troupe. Aviation daredevils for hire in motion pictures and anything else as long as the money was good. In my estimation, Art is the best pure pilot involved in the whole affair. Art, holy shit. During a test flight ahead of the race, he noticed a shock absorber in his landing gear was damaged on takeoff. Left as is, this could compromise the plane when landing, and with it, his hopes full stick in place, creating a quick and dirty autopilot. He then leaned out the door of the cockpit with a knife in hand, while hanging upside down, cut away the housing of the shock absorber, and completed some emergency repairs, and was only almost blown out of the plane by a gust of wind. And then Art landed without a hitch. Fucking incredible. That is Art, baby. Also of note is Martin Jensen, a barnstormer that at the time of the race worked as a tour pilot in Hawaii. While only a recent transplant to Honolulu, he was considered the hometown hero, and the residents of Hawaii were rooting for him. Unlike other crews who either had a sponsor or existing wealth they could use to purchase a plane for the race, repairs, etc., Martin had none of that. He instead spent the lead up to the race running up and down California, raising money and desperately searching for a local plane manufacturer that could build him a plane at the last minute. While he was in California, his wife Peg was going around Hawaii raising funds from the locals. In a stroke of luck, Martin was able to acquire a plane that someone else, uninvolved in the Derby, failed to pay for in time, though the whole adventure left the couple in deep debt. Lastly, you cannot talk about the Dole Air Derby without talking about Mildred Doran. She easily became the most famous aviator involved and was also the only woman to formally participate in the race. At the time, Mildred was 22 and working as a school teacher in Cairo, Michigan. Her mother died when she was 16, and she spent a lot of time helping to raise her siblings before going away to college. Her godfather, William Molosca, was a big presence in her life. He paid for her education and helped her discover her passion for aviation. Along with running a chain of gas stations, William also operated a local airline. Mildred was constantly catching free flights between Cairo and Flint to visit her family. Mildred was desperate to participate in the Derby and convinced William to sponsor a plane for the Dole race. He commissioned a plane that was eventually dubbed the Miss Doran. Mildred's youth, charm, good looks, and backstory made her an instant hit with the newspapers covering the race and the general public. While she was only riding along as a passenger, given she had no training on how to fly a plane. She was confident, exuberant, and able to give the papers perfectly newsworthy quotes, such as, "Why is it people always expect you to act noisy and masculine if you're interested in flying? Femininity is a girl's biggest asset, no matter what kind of work she does nor what kind of sport she chooses for a hobby. Why, if I hadn't been, well, feminine, I never would have had all those lovely hours in the air, which I managed to obtain at Flint. I never even would have had this trip." Now, you may be thinking, Aaron, hey, your last name is Doran. Are you related to Mildred? Well, that's a great question. I did some genealogical research, and we are not related. That would have been something. Thank you. Anyway, to go along with the beauty, charm, and other fashionable outfits, Mildred spent much of the pre-race festivities in a custom-tailored pilot's uniform designed to look military chic. Across her breast pocket, where a soldier would normally place medals and other commendations, she had a row of fraternity pins, saying, quote, "They represent dead scalps and show what I got out of a college education." They were all fine fellows. Now, in classic Aaron Talk fashion, it's time for the rug pull. On June 29th, 1927, First Lieutenant Lester Maitland and Navigator First Lieutenant Albert Hagenberger successfully completed their journey from Oakland Municipal Airport to Wheeler Airfield in Oahu, becoming the first men to make the nonstop trans-Pacific Hawaiian hop, undercutting the glory of the Dole Derby contestants. The flight was arranged by the U.S. Army in part to test radio navigation equipment that Hagenberger helped develop. In a fun fact, Hagenberger Road in Oakland, the one you see on the freeway, is named for Albert. There's also a Maitland Drive that ends at the Oakland airport. Despite being beat to the punch, the prize money is still there for the taking, and the race continues as planned. I keep pressing the up button. Well, almost as planned. Due to concerns around airworthiness of the planes remaining in the race, the contestants agreed to postpone the race by 4 days to allow for repairs, further test flights, and I say remaining planes because of the original pool of 15 entrants, only about half make it to the starting line, engines humming and thumping in time. This table shows the 8 remaining contestants and their takeoff order. Among the dropouts was an entrant who brought an owl, Colonel Pineapple, to assist with night flying. Another entry, the Pride of Los Angeles, crashed into the San Francisco Bay during its final approach into Oakland. Beat LA. Luckily, the crew was unharmed. In a bit of tragedy, another entry, the Spirit of John Rogers, crashed into a San Diego mountainside en route to Oakland, and the crew was killed. While the risks were well understood, there was now a pall of death over the proceedings before they formally began. One thing you'll notice on this table is that nearly every plane included a navigator. Between the limited fuel each plane could carry and Hawaii being a small target, a competent navigator was vital. I put together a couple of maps to illustrate what I mean. It's not the most scientific, but I think it gets the point across. The black line on this map is a direct line between New York and Paris, the cities Lindbergh traveled between. You can see from the red lines that if Lindbergh had drifted off course, which in worse weather he absolutely would have, as long as he cleared the Atlantic, he had a pretty good chance to be above land by the time he ran out of fuel. Now this is what the margin of error looked like for the Dole racers. After 2,400 miles, if you miss Hawaii, you had nowhere to go and are basically fucked. You've got no choice but to try and make an ocean landing and hope a search party finds you before your plane or emergency raft sinks. Now that the stakes are fully raised, it's time for takeoff. First off the line was the Oklahoma. They had no trouble getting in the air and disappear over the horizon for a bit. A short while later, they returned to Oakland Municipal Airport. Their engine was overheating and the risk of fire was just too great. Next on the runway was the El Encanto. As you can see, it crashed during takeoff. Fortunately, no one was injured. Next is the Pabco Pacific Flyer, piloted by Bay Area local Livingston Irving. I love this image that shows the wreckage of the El Encanto while the Pabco intended to get airborne. However, the Pabco was overladen with fuel and could not stay in the air, so Livingston had to abort the takeoff. On a second takeoff attempt, Livingston only made it about 50 feet in the air before crashing back down to Earth. He was also unharmed, despite being in a plane filled with gasoline. Next is the Golden Eagle, easily the fastest plane among the competitors. It takes off with no issues and heads out into the Pacific. Next is the only biplane in the race, the Miss Doran. Their trip to Oakland ahead of the race was challenging, stopping frequently due to engine issues, including an emergency landing in a field near Fresno. Their takeoff from Oakland is uneventful, but like the Oklahoma, they had to turn back due to continued engine problems. Augie and Villas make some hasty repairs while members of the crowd implore Mildred to stay behind, but she's committed. They take off again, clear the Farallon Islands, and continue out over the ocean. The Aloha has a clean takeoff, and Martin Jensen and Paul Schulter make their way for Hawaii. Next is the Woolaroc, piloted by Art Gobel. They are a work of art. They take off with no issues. Last is the Dallas Spirit, and another clean takeoff. But sometime later, Bill and Alvin returned to Oakland. The siding on the plane's fuselage had ripped away, and they could no longer safely make the trip. Woo! Too soon. So, okay, that's a lot of information. So, to recap, we have now banana split the competition again. Thanks, Bree. The four planes left attempting the Hawaiian hop are the Woolaroc, the Miss Doran, the Golden Eagle, and the Aloha. It took Maitland and Hagenberger about 26 hours to reach Hawaii, so now all we can do is wait. The next day, the first plane to land in Hawaii is the Woolaroc. Congratulations to Art and Bill. All right. Overall, their flight was uneventful and perfectly executed. The Woolaroc was one of four planes of the 8 that had radio navigation equipment, and Bill Davis just expertly kept them on track. They landed with hours of fuel to spare. Well done. Second to arrive is the Aloha. The hometown boy pulled it off. However, Martin and Paul did not have nearly as easy as a journey. First, the Aloha was not equipped with a radio. Second, and more importantly, the navigator Paul had never been in a plane prior to being hired by Martin, and therefore only knew how to navigate by sea and not air. Whoops. This meant that Martin had to fly low to the water. At one point, he tried to gain altitude to clear some cloud cover, and the Aloha went into 3 consecutive dives. At one point, the Aloha was so close to the water that a wave clipped the landing gear. Ships. They also had to circle for 2 hours above open ocean, waiting for light and clear sky to get their bearings. Airships. After that, everyone was stuck waiting. The day came and went with no sign of the Golden Eagle or the Miss Doran. The Golden Eagle had a radio, but it was only able to receive, not transmit. The Miss Doran had no radio at all. So there was no way to tell what fate befell either crew. Prize money was handed out, but the celebration was, of course, subdued. A massive search party supported by the Army and the Navy was put together to find the missing aviators. After they were able to repair the damaged skin of the fuselage and scavenge a 2-way radio from the Pabco Pacific Flyer, Bill Irwin and Alvin Eichwalt took off from Oakland to fly across the Pacific and search for their missing compatriots. They took a big risk for a small chance at success. But they knew the crews of the Golden Eagle and the Miss Doran would do the same for them. During the flight, they hit bad weather and radioed out a mayday that the Dallas Spirit was in a tailspin. Then another transmission that they were able to recover. Then another mayday and another tailspin. This time, the radio transmission cut out mid-message and the Dallas Spirit was never seen again. None of the missing aviators were ever found, and I'm sorry there isn't a happier ending, but bravery requires risk, and it's not risk if you never lose. There were occasional claims that someone found a body part of an aviator that washed up on shore. Claims that someone found a message in a bottle from Mildred were also tragically common. None of these claims were ever considered to be credible. The race's death toll did lead to an amount of backlash, and even Dole regretted not pushing for additional safety measures like mandating 2-way radios, but that's the way of aviation. Every regulation and safety measure is written in blood. As we close, I want to highlight a... Hey, as we close, I want to highlight a quote from the Boston Daily Advertiser about the race. If Mildred Doran is today a ghost, she is a ghost which regrets nothing. Let her fellow women be proud of her, but not pity her. Pity is rather to be accorded to those who have lived long and dully ambitious for nothing save food, shelter, and petty diversions. So with that in mind, let us all chase adventure and our passions like these lost souls and the many, many brave aviators of the past who challenged the wild blue yonder. Thank you.
Okay, One more banana, banana, banana. Let's bring our spirits up. Banana, banana. Okay. To tell us about a banana pirate, Kyle Weaver.
Hi, y'all. I'm glad to be here again. I know you're tired. It's the last talk, but I'm starting off with a really long quote, so please stay. I know it's a good talk after, I promise. So this is a quote by the subject of my talk, Captain William Dampier. The banana tree is exactly like the plantain for shape and bigness, not easily distinguishable from it, but by its fruit, which is a great deal smaller and is not above half so long as the plantain, being also more mellow and soft, less luscious, yet of a more delicate taste. They use this for the making drink, oftener than plantains, and it's best when used for drink, or eaten as a fruit, but it's not so good for bread, nor does it eat well at all when roasted or boiled, so it's only necessity that makes it any use this way. They grow generally where plantains do, being set intermixed with them purposely in their plantain walks. That way too long quote that I just read, that was the first use of the word banana in the English language. Yeah. It was published in 1697, and I think there's two really important things that it can tell us about its author, the Englishman William Dampier. The first thing is that he was really obsessed in a really non-neurotypical way that I really empathize with the exhaustive documentation of everything around him. The second thing that it can tell us about him is that he was so bogged down with science that he forgot to have a shred of taste. Your opinion is bananas, B-A-N-A-N-A-S. Absolutely bananas, taste, and bread aside, the account's actually pretty incredible because the guy didn't have any family money or an estate. He wasn't taken under the wing of any scientists or pioneers. He was able to write so exhaustively about all of this stuff because he was a pirate. Though, woo. That's not to say he was good at piracy though, because he was fucking awful at piracy. Truly, truly embarrassing. We'll get more to that later. Now, a lot of people became pirates for a lot of reasons. It was lucrative and romantic. It was an assertion of independence against the kings and the press gangs, but Dampier was pretty unique. He became a pirate because he was obsessed with foods and cultures and peoples and winds and the world around him, and he thought that piracy would be the best tool to experience everything. He was right. That was correct. Ships, 100%. Over his 40-year career, he became the Forrest Gump of pirates. He was inexplicably involved in all of these insane events that he had no business being a party to at all. He was the first Englishman to set foot on the Australian continent. He was the first human alive to circumnavigate the globe 3 times. There's so much more that we'll get to. The only thematic fault that I can hand him is that he never founded a theme restaurant where I can get some fucking coconut shrimp. I would have really liked that. Thank you. So in 1679, his first ever pirate cruise started off by raiding Spanish settlements off the coast of Mexico. His men were sapping and laying siege to the local fort. They were hunting for gold and being gruesomely killed for it. And as his friends and his crewmates lay dying around him, I'm going to quote again, William Dampier wrote the following passage. The tame parrots we found here were the largest and fairest birds that I ever saw in the West Indies. Their color was yellow and red, very colorfully mixed, and they would prate very prettily, and there was scarce a man but what sent aboard 1 or 2 of them. And see that? That's actually what he's really mad about here, who William Dampier is. Amidst the piracy and the looting and the death, he's upset that nobody would get him some fucking specimens. And that's who he was as a guy. More maps. More than 10 years later, after a whole decade after he started pirating, he wound up a whole halfway across the globe in the East Indies. That's where he tried that banana that we talked about earlier, before he ended up in Indonesia. And what happened in Indonesia was bananas, but it also had some life-altering effects for actually, I think, a great deal of people in this room. Again, bear with me because I'm going to quote. They have here a sort of herb or plant called ganja? Or bong? I never saw any but once, and that was at some distance from me. It appeared to me like hemp, and I thought it had been hemp till I was told to the contrary. It is reported in this plant that if it is infused in any liquor, it will stupefy the brains of any person that drinks thereof. But it operates diversely according to the constitution of the person. Some it makes sleepy, some merry, putting them into a laughing fit. Others it makes mad, but after 2 or 3 hours, they come to themselves again. I never saw the effects of it on any person, but I've heard much discourse of it. What other use this plant may serve for, I know not, but I know it's much esteemed here, and in other places too, whether it's transported. This is the first account of marijuana in the English language. You're welcome. Like, personally, my favorite thing about this, I really like that the first thing ever written about weed in English was, it wasn't mine. I was holding it. I was holding it for those guys. And you know, I never smoked it at all. I only smoked it because I thought it was hemp, and I never would have smoked it if I thought it hadn't been hemp. And you got to look at them. They're the bad influences, not me. These accounts of bananas and parrots and weed, they're ones that I cherry-picked from thousands of pages that this dude wrote. He introduced so many words and concepts into English. He is cited by the Oxford English Dictionary over 1,000 times. Yeah, I wish I had time to break it all down for you all, but like I don't. So I'm gonna speed run a little bit in the middle of this talk. Are you ready? Okay, I'm not, but let's go. Chopsticks, catamaran, thundercloud, cashew, tortilla, pozole, sea lion, barbecue, avocado smugglers, a recipe for mango chutney, lacquerware, kumquats, the first account of guacamole, breadfruit, sea breeze, ganja, creole, posse, soy, banana, flamingo. Thank you. That was my Pokemon rap bit. It was mostly for me, but I'm glad you liked it. Now, not everything in there is sunshine and rainbows, because like particularly the inclusion of flamingo is horrifying to me. It came after he described eating a dish of their tongues, which are heavily barbed. I personally cannot imagine fighting a 4-foot-tall bird for its serrated tongue. I ran from a goose like last week, so I'm out. Like, absolutely not. They're scary. William Dampier was a super successful naturalist, but he was about as good at naval piracy in 1690 as I was at LimeWire piracy in 2006. Like, we both got a lot of viruses, and neither of us got to watch the Da Vinci Code. It was a really bad time. When he finally crawled back into London after his first circumnavigation of the globe, he was destitute and ragged because every shred of effort that he could have put into looting, getting gold, general like piracy at all, he put into meticulous creation and preservation of these notes. But the notes got published, and they were so successful. People were buying this. It was flying off the shelves, and they were clamoring for these fruits he had described. They were using the words that he had put into the language first. They were toying with these ideas that he was the first person to write down. Words like subspecies. That was a brand new word. William Dampier made up the word subspecies when observing similar birds. Yeah, science, yes. And over 130 years later, Charles Darwin would carry copies of all of Dampier's books aboard the HMS Beagle and directly cite him as an influence for On the Origin of Species. And that is not the only major book that Dampier influenced. See, in 1704, Dampier's ship stopped at this uninhabited island back here and dropped off a crewmate who had been mouthing off to the captain. That crewmate got abandoned on that island for 5 years. Dampier sailed around the entire goddamned globe before coming back to pick him up. Yeah, it sucked. That crewmate got really good at living off the lands, though. And they wrote a book about him called Robinson Crusoe. Forrest Gump of pirates, I'm telling you. Dampier's life was incredible. There is so much more that I did not have time to put in this talk at all. He was the direct inspiration for Gulliver and his travels. But I've got to reiterate that, like, as a pirate, he was just genuinely embarrassing. Now, thanks to Taika Waititi and, like, every single one of your queer friends, you might be familiar with my own personal favorite historical figure, Captain Stede Bonnet. Now, Captain Stede Bonnet was a real dude and was a contemporary of William Dampier's. But here's the thing, though he was also a notably terrible pirate, Stede was at least good enough at piracy that they executed him for it. Spoiler, sorry, season 3. William Dampier never plundered anything expensive. He's not on record killing anybody. His thefts were generally petty. They involved things like Mexican chocolate and Vietnamese pork belly. He died in bed as an old man, and he never got any better at piracy, so he died poor too. I'm the first to admit that there is not very much that I am good at, but I hope that when I die poor, there will be something that I was so bad at that somebody is still talking about it hundreds of years later. And maybe if I'm really lucky, I am friends with somebody in this very room tonight who will be the person who discovers the next famous drug that you swear to historians you never even tried. And I want you to know that I support you. And to you, I will raise my glass. Thanks all.
To the worst pirate. And that is our show. I want to thank you so much for coming. I want to thank our amazing speakers for getting on stage and doing all of that research. Our volunteers at the door, at the merge table, at the video contraption, with the cameras, everyone that has come together for tonight. And before you leave, coming up next on August 6th is Rome. You can use that QR code, Jobby, to get a discounted ticket. That discount link is available for 1 week only. And if you happen to be in New York, our next show in New York is Mischief on July 24th. Again, our membership is what keeps this event alive, so please become a member and join us on weird adventures as we go outside of this building. Join us at our Facebook group on Something Weird, where our speakers will dump all of their cool links and all of their side research that they couldn't cram into 10/15 minutes. And you can find us at oddsalon.com or in all of the usual places at Oddsalon. Thank you so much, and good night. QR code.